I watched from the side of the Grand Cathedral, my hands shoved deep into the pockets of my black suit as Mary smiled up at him. Kenneth, the man she chose over me. The man who never once carried her through months of unbearable pain, who never once stayed up every night just to adjust her broken leg when she cried in her sleep. It was supposed to be me standing there. It was supposed to be us. The worst part wasn't that she left. It was that she left with a soft kiss on my forehead, whispering thank you like I was a doctor who had finished a surgery, not the man who had given up everything just to teach her how to walk again. She used the legs I repaired to walk straight into someone else's arms. I wasn't even invited to the wedding. I came because I had to see it with my own eyes, because part of me still didn't believe she could do it, that she would actually go through with it. But the sight was inescapable. The stained glass windows painted her in holy light, her white dress trailing behind her like a river, her hand locked in his, not mine. The vows began. I should have left. I should have turned around and walked out before her lips even formed the words. But I stayed, nails biting into my palms, forcing myself to watch every second. Because somewhere, buried deep in the wreckage of my heart, I thought, maybe she'd look back. Maybe just once, she'd glance toward the crowd, find my face, and remember who fought for her when everyone else left. She never did. When the priest asked if anyone had any objections, I thought the universe would at least let me scream. Instead, silence stretched so loud it drowned my thoughts. And when Kenneth leaned in and kissed her, sealing the end of everything I had hoped for, I smiled. A crooked, broken smile that didn't reach my eyes. Congratulations, Mary. You finally learned to walk again. Too bad you walked away from the only man who never would have let you fall. Hugh Carter. That's who I used to be. A name printed in Forbes magazines, a face plastered on business panels, a success story fathers told their sons about ambition. CEO of Carter Enterprises before the accident, before the fall, before I became a cautionary tale wrapped in bandages and steel rods. They said I should have died. Looking back, maybe it would have been easier. I had been moving so fast, chasing power, chasing numbers, that I didn't realize how brittle my world really was. All it took was a single crash, a moment of shattered glass and spinning metal too, and the life I thought I was building forever. They told me recovery would take years if I even walked again. Most bets were on never. Doctors spoke in soft tones when they thought I wasn't awake, whispering about wheelchair modifications, suggesting therapy for acceptance, as if breathing and not moving was enough to call it living. Enter Mary. She wasn't like the others. No forced sympathy, no condescending smiles. She walked into my hospital room on the second week, wearing scrubs too big for her slender frame, hair tied back in a messy bun, a clipboard tucked under one arm like a shield. Good. You're awake, she said, without a hint of hesitation. Time to stop feeling sorry for yourself. I almost laughed. If my ribs weren't broken, I might have. Mary didn't pity me. She pushed me. Harder than anyone ever had. When I snapped at her, she snapped back. When I refused therapy, she refused to leave. When I fell, humiliated in front of staff, she picked me up, looked me dead in the eyes, and said, "Next time you'll fall better." And somehow, I believed her. Day after day, she showed up, rain or shine. She became the only constant in a world that had forgotten me. Friends disappeared. Board members whispered about replacements. Even my own family sent polite texts instead of visits. But Mary? Mary was there, steady as the tide. At first, I hated her for it. Her stubbornness was a mirror I didn't want to look into, but over time, I started to crave her presence. Her quick smile. Her sarcastic quips. Her quiet moments when she thought I wasn't watching, her guard down, her fingers tracing the edge of a file absent-mindedly. I don't remember the exact moment admiration turned into something more. It wasn't a dramatic epiphany. It was slow, subtle, like learning how to breathe again after being underwater for too long. One day she adjusted the weights on my ankle and her hand brushed mine. I jolted like she had shocked me. She didn't notice. She just continued adjusting, professional and calm. But my heart had already started a war in my chest I couldn't control. I told myself it was nothing, a simple crush born from proximity and gratitude. I repeated the lie so often I almost believed it, until the day I took my first steps. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't graceful, it was a messy, shuffling, sweaty, 3-foot stumble. But when I turned, panting, to look at her, Mary smiled like I had just conquered Everest, like I had given her the world. No one had ever looked at me like that before. Not when I closed million-dollar deals. Not when I climbed the Forbes 40 under 40 list. Only Mary. Only then. And I knew. I was done for. She didn't see it, of course. She saw a patient, a project, a job. She didn't see the man underneath, bleeding hope in every step he took toward her. Or maybe she did. Maybe that's why she left before I could say it. Kenneth. The name tasted bitter even thinking it now. He had been a ghost in her stories, a regret she rarely mentioned. The man who chose his career over her heart years ago, who disappeared when she needed him most. I never thought she would take him back. Not after everything, but life has a funny way of kicking you hardest when you think you finally stood up. She said they reconnected, that he changed, that sometimes people deserve second chances. I wanted to scream. What about my chance? What about the pieces I rebuilt just so I could stand next to her finally whole? Instead, I congratulated her. I smiled like a fool and said I was happy for her. Then I went home and destroyed the room that still smelled like hospital-grade disinfectant and lavender shampoo, the shampoo she always used. Hugh Carter, billionaire CEO, beaten not by the market, not by fate, but by a woman's choice he never saw coming. And still, somewhere inside me, a traitorous part whispered that if she ever turned around, if she ever reached out again, I would catch her, without hesitation. Some things don't heal, no matter how many times you stand back up. The day before her wedding, I got a message from Mary. It wasn't anything dramatic. No confession, no apology, just a simple text. Hope you're doing okay. 12 words. That's all it took to reopen the wounds I had spent months stitching shut. I stared at my phone for so long the screen dimmed. My thumb hovered over the reply button. I could have said 1,000 things, could have poured out every emotion I buried since she told me she was marrying Kenneth, could have reminded her who held her upright when she was too weak to stand, who carried her when the world broke her spirit. Instead, I turned off the screen and shoved the phone into my pocket like it was a grenade waiting to go off. What was I supposed to say? Congratulations on marrying the man who never showed up when it mattered? The next morning, I woke early, unable to fight the gnawing pit in my stomach. I told myself I wouldn't go near the venue, that I wasn't that kind of man, that I still had some pride left. I lied. By noon, I found myself parked across the street from the cathedral, hidden behind the tinted windows of my black sedan. The bells rang out, sharp and joyous, cutting through the heavy silence inside the car. From my seat, I had a perfect view of the front steps. Kenneth stood there first, grinning like the arrogant fool he was, shaking hands, laughing with old friends in sharp suits and polished shoes. The golden boy, reborn. Then she came out. Mary, a vision in white, with a dress that clung to her like a second skin, trailing lace and dreams I thought were mine. Her smile wasn't the nervous, jittery kind people wear on their wedding day. It, was steady, bright, like she truly believed in the future she was walking into, a future that didn't have me in it. My hands gripped the steering wheel until the leather squeaked under my palms. I almost convinced myself to leave. I put the car in drive, looked straight ahead, ready to escape before I humiliated myself further. And then I saw it. Kenneth, reaching for her waist, leaning down to whisper something. Mary laughing, tilting, her head back the way she always did when she was caught off guard. And then, her eyes swept the crowd, just for a second, almost too quick to catch. But I caught it. She wasn't looking for him. She was looking for me. It was stupid, irrational, wishful thinking. But in that brief flicker of a moment, I swear her smile faltered. Just a crack, barely visible unless you knew her as well as I did. I slammed the car into park and leaned back against the seat, heart hammering like I had run a marathon. What did it mean? What did any of it mean? Did she regret it? Was she hoping I'd show up and stop the ceremony like some pathetic movie scene? If she wanted me, she could have chosen me. She could have said something, anything, instead of handing herself back to the man who once threw her away. I rested my head against the leather and closed my eyes, willing the ache to pass. It didn't. The doors of the cathedral swung open. The music soared. People turned, their faces lighting up. A fairy tale unfolding right in front of me, and I wasn't even a guest at the ball. I was just the forgotten villain sitting outside, watching someone else steal the ending that should have been mine. The priest began the ceremony. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. I knew them by heart. I take you, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health. Promises I had already made in my heart when I held her trembling body through night terrors, promises I lived before I ever had the chance to say them aloud. And yet, when the question came, if anyone has any reason why these two should not be wed, speak now or forever hold your peace, I didn't move. I sat there like a coward, swallowing down every protest, every scream that clawed at my throat. Maybe because I finally understood something horrible. Mary didn't choose Kenneth over me because he was better. She chose him because, unlike me, he hadn't seen her at her worst. He didn't know how vulnerable she could be, how angry, how broken. He loved the idea of her, the polished version, not the real, messy, stubborn woman who needed more than just flowers and promises. She needed someone willing to walk through the fire with her. And maybe she thought I was too close, that I had seen too much. Maybe she thought she could start fresh with someone who didn't remind her of every painful step it took to get here. The bells rang again, louder this time. The crowd erupted in cheers. Petals rained from above like blessings. And Mary, glowing under the soft afternoon sun, walked down the steps on legs I taught to be strong again, into someone else's arms. I let out a slow, shuddering breath and finally turned the key in the ignition. This time, I didn't look back. The days after the wedding passed like a blur. I don't even remember half of them. Sleep became optional. Food tasted like cardboard. I spent hours sitting on the balcony of my apartment, staring at the empty skyline, as if the answer to why she left was written somewhere between the stars. Lisa came by once or twice, dropping off food I never ate, trying to talk. I ignored her. It wasn't her fault, but I couldn't stand to hear one more person tell me I'd move on. Move on from what? From the woman who stitched me back together only to tear me apart again? From the only person who made me believe that even a broken man like me could be wanted for something more than his bank account or title? No, I wasn't ready to move on. Not when every step I took reminded me of her. Some nights I woke up reaching for my phone, half dreaming that there would be a message, a missed call, anything. But the screen stayed blank, silent, empty. Kenneth's name started popping up more often on my news feeds. Kenneth and Mary, the golden couple, photographed at galas, smiling perfectly for the cameras, hand in hand. She looked radiant, untouchable, like nothing in the world could shake her. Meanwhile, I was a ghost haunting my own life. Sometimes I wondered if she ever thought about me, if she ever passed by a place we had been and felt that same hollow ache in her chest. Probably not. Mary was strong, stronger than me, apparently. She knew how to cut cleanly when she made a decision. I hated that about her. I admired it too. One night, 2 weeks after the wedding, I found myself driving through the city aimlessly. No destination, no plan, just endless lights blurring past my window, smearing into a kaleidoscope of what-ifs and could-have-beens. I didn't realize where I was going until I pulled into the parking lot of the old rehabilitation center. It was closed for the night, dark and empty, but my body moved without thinking. I climbed the rusted stairs, ignoring the protest of my joints, and sat on the bench outside the main doors. This was where it started. Where she first looked at me like I was more than a broken thing to be pitied. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself remember it all. Her hands steadying mine as I learned to grip the walker. Her voice low and firm, whispering that I was stronger than I knew. Her laughter when I cursed under my breath, refusing to let her see the tears of frustration. All of it. Every single moment. I stayed there for hours, frozen by the memories, until a soft vibration buzzed against my thigh. My phone. A message. For a moment, I was too afraid to look. Hope was a dangerous thing. Hope built you up just high enough to shatter every bone when you fell again. I unlocked the screen with a shaking thumb. One new message. Unknown number. Can we talk? No name. No signature. But I knew. Somehow, deep down, I knew. I stared at the words, heart thundering, breath shallow. Was it her? Did she change her mind? Was it possible that all the things I told myself were lies, that she hadn't been as sure as she seemed standing on those cathedral steps? Another buzz, another message, please, just once. I stood up so fast the world tilted around me. My legs, still not fully recovered, wobbled under the sudden movement. I steadied myself against the railing, mind racing. I typed back 2 words. Where? The reply came almost immediately. The old pier. Midnight. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I didn't even lock my car as I got in and sped toward the waterfront. By the time I got there, the wind had picked up, cold and sharp against my skin. The pier stretched out into the dark water, creaking under the weight of years, abandoned by time. And there she was. Mary. Standing at the end of the dock, hair whipping around her face, arms hugging her body against the chill. She turned when she heard my footsteps, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. The whole world held its breath. She took a step toward me, then stopped, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed. I broke first. My voice cracked on her name. Mary. She flinched like I had struck her, but she didn't look away. I'm sorry, she whispered. The words barely carried over the wind, but they slammed into me harder than any blow. I swallowed the lump in my throat, struggling to keep my voice steady. Why? I asked. Why him? She shook her head, tears glistening in her eyes. I thought if I chose something safe, I wouldn't get hurt again. And was it safe? I asked bitterly. Marrying someone who never stayed the first time? Lips trembled. It wasn't about him. It was about me. About being too scared to believe that someone like you could ever really stay. I laughed, a raw, broken sound. I already stayed, Mary. I stayed when no one else did. She closed the distance between us, standing so close I could feel the tremble in her hands. I know, she said, and I was wrong. I was so wrong. The silence between us stretched and twisted until it snapped, and without thinking, without planning, I reached for her. For the first time, she didn't pull away. Her fingers curled into the fabric of my jacket like she was afraid I'd disappear if she let go. I stood there frozen, barely daring to breathe, afraid that if I moved, the fragile thing between us would shatter. For a moment, it felt like time rewound itself. Like we were back in the therapy room, her hand steadying mine, pulling me out of the darkness 1 stubborn inch at a time. But then she pulled back, not completely. Just enough to look up at me with eyes so haunted, so conflicted, that my heart sank before she even said a word. There's something else, she said softly. Something you don't know. I stiffened. Every instinct screamed at me to brace for impact. She wiped at her eyes, took a shaky breath, and whispered, "I never actually married Kenneth." The world tilted. I staggered back a step, confusion roaring in my ears louder than the crashing waves. "What do you mean you didn't marry him? I was there. I saw it." "You saw a ceremony," she said, her voice cracking. "You didn't see a signed license." I stared at her, the weight of her words crashing over me like a tidal wave. "Are you telling me it was fake?" She nodded, biting her lower lip until it turned white. "We staged it. Kenneth's father. He's been sick. Terminal. Kenneth begged me to pretend, to give his dad a final happy memory. I owed him. Or at least, I thought I did." My fists clenched involuntarily. "You owed him more than you owed me?" Her face crumpled. "It wasn't about that. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought if I stayed away from you, you'd heal faster, move on without me dragging you down." A bitter laugh escaped before I could stop it. Heal? I was dying. "Mary, every day after you walked away, I was dying a little more." She flinched like I'd hit her. "I didn't know, because you didn't stay to find out." Silence fell between us, thick and heavy. I turned away, staring out at the endless stretch of black water, trying to steady the riot in my chest. "You should have told me," I said finally, my voice low. "You should have trusted me." She came to stand beside me, her shoulder brushing mine. I didn't think I deserved that trust. "And now?" I asked, bitter and broken and so tired. "I don't know," she whispered. "But if you tell me to leave right now, I will. No games, no begging. I'll walk away and never bother you again." Turned to face her, really look at her. She wasn't the same woman who walked down those cathedral steps smiling for a future that didn't exist. She was raw now, stripped down to the bone, and for the first time, I realized maybe I wasn't the only one who broke. Maybe we had both been bleeding in different corners of the same battlefield, too stubborn, too scared to reach for each other. Reached out slowly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She leaned into the touch like she had been waiting forever. "Don't leave," I said, barely louder than a breath. "Not again." Her knees buckled, and I caught her easily, pulling her into my arms, holding her as tightly as I had dreamed of doing all those sleepless nights. She buried her face against my chest and whispered, "I'm so sorry, Hugh." I closed my eyes, letting the sound of her voice, the smell of her shampoo, the thundering beat of her heart against mine sink into my bones. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I allowed myself to believe it might not be too late. We stood there for what felt like hours, wrapped in silence heavier than any words we could have spoken. The cold air off the water whipped around us, but neither of us moved. Neither of us dared to break whatever fragile thing had finally grown back between us. Mary's hands trembled against my chest. She wasn't crying anymore, but her breathing was shaky, uneven, like she was still waiting for me to push her away. I tightened my arms around her. "I don't understand," I said quietly. "Why pretend? Why not just tell me?" Her fingers fisted into the fabric of my jacket. "Because you were finally standing on your own again. I thought if I pulled you back into my mess, you'd fall with me." I pulled back just enough to see her face. In the low light, she looked exhausted, vulnerable, more real than she had ever let herself be. "You don't get it," I said, my voice rough. "I was standing because of you. Every step, every breath. It was all because you believed in me when no one else did." She looked up at me, eyes shining. "And I still do, Hugh. I always did." A bitter smile twisted my mouth. "Then why did you leave?" She shook her head helplessly. "Because I was afraid. I thought if I stayed, I'd hurt you worse than the accident ever did." "You hurt me more by leaving," I said, the truth ripping out of me, raw and unfiltered. "You used the strength I fought for to walk away." Mary closed her eyes, tears escaping, down her cheeks. I know. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The waves crashed against the pier below, steady and relentless, like the beating of a broken heart. I thought about the man I was before the accident. Arrogant, invincible, too busy climbing ladders to notice when the people around me fell. And I thought about the man I had become, the one standing here willing to forgive the only woman who ever made him believe there was more to life than winning. Maybe this was what real strength looked like, not standing alone at the top, but reaching out even when every part of you was screaming not to. "Do you love him?" I asked, voice steady despite the storm inside me. Mary opened her eyes and stared at me like she couldn't believe I needed to ask. "No," she said without hesitation. "I never loved Kenneth. I thought I owed him. That's not the same thing." The knot in my chest loosened slightly, but the ache didn't disappear. "And me?" I pressed, needing to hear it, needing it like oxygen. She took a deep, trembling breath. "I never stopped." The words hung between us, shimmering with possibility and pain. I brushed my thumb across her cheek, wiping away the tears. "Then don't leave again," I said. "Stay. Fight for this. Fight for us." Mary nodded, her face crumpling with relief. "I want to, if you'll still have me." I kissed her before she could say anything else, before doubt or fear could creep back in. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was messy, desperate, years of longing and heartbreak and hope crashing together all at once. She kissed me back with equal ferocity, clutching at me like she was drowning and I was her only air. When we finally broke apart, both of us were breathing hard. "I missed you," she whispered against my lips. I rested my forehead against hers. "I missed you more." We stood there, like that, the world spinning around us until a sharp voice cut through the night. "Well, isn't this cozy?" I stiffened instantly, pulling Mary protectively behind me as Kenneth stepped onto the pier, hands shoved casually into the pockets of his designer jacket. "What the hell are you doing here?" I growled. Kenneth smirked, but there was no real humor in it. Only bitterness. "I could ask you the same thing, Hugh, but I think it's pretty obvious." His eyes flicked to Mary, and something dark and ugly twisted in his expression. "You really are predictable," he sneered. "The broken CEO and the bleeding heart therapist, what a story." Mary stepped out from behind me, her chin high, her eyes hard. "This has nothing to do with you, Kenneth." He laughed, sharp and bitter. "Of course it does. You used me, Mary, just like you used Hugh. You needed someone to save. It's the only way you know how to feel important." I saw Mary flinch, but she didn't back down. "I never used you," she said calmly. "I helped you because I thought it was right. But I don't owe you my life." Kenneth's face twisted. "And what about me? What about everything I gave up for you?" "You gave up nothing," she said. "You asked me to lie for you, to pretend for you. I did it because I thought it would bring peace to your family. But you and I both know you never loved me, Kenneth. You loved the idea of someone standing next to you while you chased everything you thought mattered." Kenneth's fists clenched at his sides. For a second, I thought he might actually lunge. At me, at her. But then he laughed again, low and bitter. "Good luck," he spat. "She'll break you, too. It's what she does." And then he turned and disappeared into the darkness, his footsteps echoing off the wood. I let out a slow breath I hadn't realized I was holding and turned back to Mary. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded, but her eyes were sad. "I'm sorry you had to see that." I reached for her hand, threading our fingers together. "I'm not," I said. "Better now than later." We stood there in silence, letting the night wash over us, letting the past drift away with the tide. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel lost. I didn't feel broken. I felt free. Mary squeezed my hand, and when I looked down at her, she was smiling. Not the brittle, forced smiles she wore at the wedding. Not the careful, professional smiles she wore at the hospital. A real smile. The One she used to give me when I stumbled through a therapy session, cursing and sweating but refusing to quit. The smile that had saved me once before. "Let's go home," I said, tugging her gently toward the parking lot. "Home?" she echoed, voice soft. "Yeah," I said it, "wherever you are." Her eyes filled with fresh tears, but this time they were happy. We walked off the pier together, hand in hand, leaving the ghosts behind us. Neither of us looked back. The next few days felt like stepping back into a life I thought I had lost for good. Mary moved in with me without ceremony. No dramatic declarations, no speeches. She just started showing up with boxes, tossing her keys on the counter like she'd always belonged there. And the truth was, she had. Long before I realized it, she'd carved a space for herself inside the wreckage of my world. We spent nights talking, learning each other all over again. She told me about the nights she cried herself to sleep, feeling like she had betrayed everyone she cared about. I told her about the days I sat in empty boardrooms, staring at the walls, wondering if success meant anything without someone to share it with. But even as we stitched the pieces back together, there was still one thing left unfinished. One weight neither of us could shake. Kenneth. It wasn't enough to walk away from him. Not anymore. He had manipulated her, used guilt to trap her into a lie that almost ruined both of us. And he thought he would walk away clean, with no consequences. He was wrong. The plan formed. Naturally, like it had always been waiting in the back of my mind. I didn't tell Mary the details. She didn't ask. She just looked at me one night, her head on my chest, and said, "Promise me you won't hurt yourself over him." I kissed the top of her head and whispered, "Not a chance." By the end of the week, Kenneth's perfect little empire began to crumble. First, the news broke that the marriage everyone had celebrated was a fraud. An anonymous source leaked documents showing the wedding had been staged without a legal license. The press tore into him like wolves, questioning everything from his credibility to his motives. Then quietly, methodically, I began pulling strings. Contracts dried up. Deals evaporated. Investors backed away. Every company he tried to work with suddenly found better opportunities elsewhere, better offers, better partnerships. It didn't take long before Kenneth's name stopped being a golden ticket and started becoming a warning label. And when he finally figured out where the walls were coming from, he showed up at my office pounding on the glass like a man possessed. My secretary didn't even flinch. She called security with a practiced calm, sipping her coffee while Kenneth screamed threats down the hallway. I let him in anyway. I wanted him to see me, to understand. He stormed into my office, face red with rage. "You think you can ruin me and get away with it?" I leaned back in my chair, hands folded calmly on the desk. "I'm not ruining you," I said coolly. "You did that yourself. All I did was stop protecting you." His fists slammed against the desk, but I didn't so much as blink. "You think Mary will stay with you after this?" he spat. "When she sees what kind of man you really are?" I stood up, slowly, letting the silence stretch until he shifted uneasily on his feet. "Mary already knows exactly who I am," I said. "She knew the moment she asked me to stay and fight for us." Kenneth sneered. "You're just another placeholder, like I was." Smiled, a slow, dangerous smile that finally felt like the man I used to be, and the man I had become. "No, Kenneth," I said quietly. "You were a mistake. I'm the future she chose." He lunged across the desk, but security was already pulling him back before he could get close. As they dragged him out of the building, kicking and cursing, I sat, back down and opened the file on my desk. Inside were the final documents. Every contract Kenneth had depended on had now been transferred. To me, it hadn't been about money. It hadn't even been about revenge. It was about showing him that some things couldn't be stolen back once lost. Some choices were permanent, and some mistakes you paid for in full. I closed the file and leaned back, feeling lighter than I had in years. When I got home that night, Mary was waiting for me on the couch, wrapped in one of my hoodies, hair pulled up in a messy bun. "Everything okay?" she asked, studying my face. I crossed the room in 3 long strides, pulled her into my arms, and kissed her until she was breathless. "Everything's perfect," I whispered against her mouth. She laughed softly, threading her fingers through my hair. "You're late." "Got caught up tying off some loose ends," I said. She tilted her head, eyes glinting with mischief. "Anything I should know about?" I smiled, brushing my thumb across her cheek. "Just cleaning up the past so it doesn't follow us into the future." Mary snuggled closer, her hand resting over my heart. "I'm proud of you," she said. "Not because you fought back, but because you didn't lose yourself doing it." I pressed my lips against her forehead, breathing her in. "I lost a lot of things," I said, "but I'll never lose you again." She looked up at me, her smile soft, unguarded. "You never lost me, Hugh. You just had to find your way back." I pulled her fully into my lap, wrapping her up as tightly as I could. "Then let's not waste any more time," I said. "Marry me." Her eyes widened, mouth falling open. "No speeches," I said quickly. "No ring yet. No grand gestures. Just marry me. Be mine. Officially." Finally, tears welled in her eyes, but her smile outshone every diamond in the world. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times. Yes. I kissed her again, laughing into her mouth, feeling the last of the bitterness, the grief, the anger finally slip away. Later, that night when we lay tangled together in bed, I realized something. Revenge was satisfying. Winning was exhilarating. But nothing compared to the feeling of knowing that despite everything, despite the accidents and betrayals and years lost, we had found our way back to each other, stronger, unbreakable. Finally home.